Hello, everybody. This is Fernando, or Ricardo. This is Ricardo.
Hello.
This is Ricky.
Hello, everyone.
And I am Diane. And we are very excited to be here today. It's a little bit scary, which is perfect, because we're here to talk about fear. You know, heart palpitations, sweaty palms, elevated breathing. I think it's fair to say that we're both feeling a little bit of all three right now. Right, babe?
Right.
Yeah. We hope that at the end of sharing 2 stories today, you think a little bit differently about your own fears.
So, what are you most afraid of? Are you afraid of forgetting your speech on stage? Are you afraid of failing, of losing someone? Environmental crisis? Are you afraid of not looking good? Being alone?
When I was 27, a coworker suggested that I race a triathlon. I didn't know what that entailed, other than a swim, a bike, and a run. But I signed up, I trained a little bit, and off I flew to San Andres, Colombia. I completed the race and I did pretty well, and I liked the sport. So the second year, I signed up again. Only that year, 2005, the swim course changed. Instead of being a 2-lap, close to the shore, safe swim, a boat would take us to Johnny Cay Island, and the swim portion would be us swimming back to San Andres. An 1,800-meter swim in the open water. Now, I knew where I was geographically in the Caribbean, and that if I missed San Andres, I was like going. And the water was choppy that day.
When I was 4, I remember my mom forcing me onto a bus to go to my first day of school. It would be the first time that I would be by myself on a bus full of strangers. Now, what I can remember from that day is crying my lungs out and pulling my mom's shiny hair out with my little but terrified hands. I got a hold of her shirt, then her arm, then her hand. Then, as the woman from the bus yanked me away from my mom, I was off. All by myself, terrified that I was being sent away.
What if, instead of having no fear, you got to know your fear? Now, we're not talking about you going around poking the bear or riding a motorcycle with no helmet, because that's carelessness. Some fears are meant to keep us alive, and other fears keep us from truly living. But today we're talking about the second kind of fear, the fears that keep us from truly living.
Have you ever been in a situation where you were so scared or so nervous that all you wished was that you could close your eyes for it to disappear? Well, I think I can say that we all have. And this talk is exactly about those moments. Those moments when you think that you have to wait until that fearful moment passes so that you can get back to living. So what if we change that? What if we accepted fear as part of our lives? What if instead of tattooing ourselves with no fear, we said, know your fears?
I got to know my fear back at Johnny Cay Island. The water was rough. I took note of the waves and the swells and the whitecaps, but before I knew it, I was off, swimming, with the 8 other girls that were racing that day. About halfway to San Andres, I realized that I was alone, that nobody was swimming around me. My heart rate suddenly elevated, my breathing sped up, and before I knew it, I was hyperventilating. I was trembling from head to toe, and I couldn't swim any longer. It felt like every cell in my entire body was filled with fear. Now, there's something especially terrifying about screaming for your life when nobody can hear you. But that's what happened that day out in the ocean. As I screamed, "Ayúdame!" in Spanish, the swells of the water lifted the ocean, making it impossible for anybody to see me. That day out in the ocean, I got to know fear, and I learned what it meant to panic.
So there I was, bumping along the bus, choking in my own tears next to strangers. And every second that passed, I was distancing myself from where I felt safe and secure. Hello, fear! That sad situation repeated itself in several different occasions. Whether I was being sent away to sports tournaments or school trips or any other ridiculous thing that my parents found, they did. They kept on pushing me again and again and again and again into my deep fear of being alone. And I can tell you something. I was afraid, and in every one of those trips, that fear resurfaced.
What if fear was the space where you could live your most potent life? Now, Ricky and I both experienced panic in a fearful situation. We didn't know then, but that it would be that same space years later that would pivot our lives to exactly where we are today. Now, back to the middle of the ocean. Thank goodness the rescue boat finally saw me. It seemed like it was an hour later. It was probably 15 minutes, but it was a very long 15 minutes. They came around to my aid, they picked me up out of the race, and I quit. I cried for days, and when I got back to Medellin, and my fourth graders asked me how the race was, I was too ashamed to tell them what had actually happened. I made a promise with myself that I would never race another triathlon in my life.
Grabbing my bags by myself in some lost city in the middle of Oklahoma, where I was to spend one summer in a new house in a new hosting family. That would be a new house of strangers for me. I was nervous, only this time something happened. It was different. The moment I started talking to Morgan, my host brother, something happened and it felt okay. I realized that after 5 years, I could be okay even when I was feeling lonely or when I was feeling scared. At that moment in my life, I started gaining so much power. So, what if fear was actually a gateway to your greatest freedom?
I remember where I was. It was 2008. I was sitting on a white sofa in Brazil when somebody mentioned the word Ironman, a long-distance triathlon. A 3.8 kilometer swim, then a 180 kilometer bike, then a 42 kilometer run. Now, forget about the bike and the run. A 3.8 kilometer swim in the open water, 3,800 meters. I couldn't wrap my head around why anybody would do such a race. And I remember saying, I could never do that. Well, fast forward to 2011, and I would hear the familiar sound of the triathlon horn. Signaling the start of my first Ironman in Cozumel. That's me. Happy to be alive. Thanks. But happier to have overcome. Leaning into that race meant everything. It meant knowing, understanding, and facing a very real fear, but doing it with no motive other than to swim alongside that fear, rather than let it paralyze me any longer. It meant stepping, or in this case, swimming, out of the ordinary and into the extraordinary. And let me tell you, the water in Cozumel was amazing.
I was a lucky kid, and in my case, I needed someone else. It was thanks to my parents who kept on pushing me again and again and again and again that I could become strong, confident, and free. Freedom was a gift that I received from them. They encouraged me to understand that I could be okay and that I could not only live, but that I could also thrive despite my fears. That made me a better son back then. It made me a better husband. It has made me a better person. And on top of that, some of my greatest and most fulfilling moments have happened while traveling away in distant countries. From mountain biking the mountains in New Zealand to swimming in the shores of Cozumel. I have learned some of the most invaluable lessons thanks to my parents. Thanks to that.
Fear is the price we pay, or the currency that we use to move from an ordinary life into an extraordinary life. Now, I didn't know back in 2011 that the will to overcome a fear was going to pivot my life in unimaginable ways, but that's what happened. 12 hours and 56 minutes after the race started, I would cross the finish line, tired, happy, sweaty, and disgusting, but very proud. And I would think to myself, I am going to hug the first person I see. And 8 years later, here's that person. We've since married and have 2 amazing children.
And a dog.
And a dog. Fear met Ricky and I years ago, but nowadays, we've learned, and we're still learning, to step into a space where our heart rates rise, where our palms get sweaty, and where our breathing becomes shallow. We've learned, and we're learning, to be okay with not being okay.
So back to all of you. What are you most afraid of? Failing? Are you afraid of losing someone? Environmental crisis? Not looking good? Or like in my case, being alone?
So you, Grace, Martha,
Yes.
all of you were all made for the mountain before you. So buckle up. When you learn to transform your relationship with fear, fear becomes your fuel. So what if the next time you feel fear creeping in, you put on a helmet, because not wearing one is careless, and you enjoy the ride. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.